Okay, so real quick, just to review, whatever the direction of the light is, the surfaces that are perpendicular to that, the planes that are perpendicular, are the ones that are going to get the most light. All right, so that's fine. So let's say the light's coming from here, and we have a surface here. I'll just add a few more planes. Now let's say we have a shape like that. So let's say this is on a flat surface. And you can do this, again, with a piece of paper. Just fold it, take a strip of paper and then fold it a few times. So you get something like this. Now, the perpendicular surface here would be lit up the most. So that is called the highlight. Highlight. Now, these two surfaces aren't perpendicular, these ones, but they're still, if the light's coming from this direction, they're still getting hit, They're getting hit by less light, but they're still getting hit by light. So these are called midtone. So midtone is still in the light side. And this one too is also midtone. Midtone. But now these ones, these three planes, are facing away from the light. They're not getting hit. So you can actually imagine, or even draw in just lines, and does that line touch? And in this case, it doesn't. So these three are shadows. Shadow, shadow, shadow. Or shaded. But, I mean, because shadow technically is where light doesn't hit, right? So these three are going to be darker. But these are going to be light. And you can think of it as two families, or two countries. So you have, say we had countries, right? And there's these two countries, and this is the country of light, and this is the country of shadow. And they're separated by a border. So where would that border be? Well, in this case, it would be right here. The border is always in between midtone and shadow. That's where the border is. And that's going to be more important as we progress, but it's important to know that there is a border, and that's between the light or the midtone and the shadow. And the midtone is part of the light side, and the highlight is part of the light side. But there's part of the shadow that we haven't covered yet, and that is reflected light. So let's talk about reflected light now. So we have this set up, but what if there was a wall or an object here? The light travels in a straight line, but when it hits a plane, depending on what the surface is, it bounces off it. So it bounces off and scatters in different directions. And if there was a wall here, what would happen is, if all the light's still coming from the same direction, remember we're not using a spotlight where it's like coming out like that. We're using just light coming all at one direction evenly. Then it's going to hit these surfaces and it's going to bounce. So some of this light is going to bounce, and this is all reflected light now. And so where does the light bounce and where does it hit? Well, it's going to bounce and hit the wall here. So this is going to be hit by reflected light. Actually, all three of these, if this wall is that big, they're all going to be hit by reflected light. Reflected light. But it's important to remember that there is this border, and within the country of light, you have highlight and midtones, And within the country of shadow, you have core shadows, which are, just think of those as the shadow that is not getting any reflected light. And then you have reflected light. So even though it's called reflected light, it's still in the shadow family. It's on the shadow side. And this border that separates the two is called, this one right here, is called the Terminator. And it's very important because it separates the two, the light and the shadow countries. And it's moving a little bit ahead, but things that happen on the Terminator is the core shadow tends to be really close to the Terminator, and then on the midtone side, the most saturated part tends to be right beside the Terminator. So it's a very important area.